Today we're diving into the great American contradiction: hating socialism until you need it, loving free markets until they hurt you, and demanding government stay out of your business until your business is failing. This isn't about farmers being bad people. It's about choices having consequences. And boy, are we seeing some consequences. Welcome back to Mind Mirror. Let's break this down.
This is the first time in my life farming that I still have crop in my bins that I can't sell. Basically what we're getting out, a bushel of corn or a bushel of rice, would be like you making $5 an hour and trying to pay your bills at home. Mexico and China are the two biggest rice buyers for the United. They buy more rice off of us than anyone. And when they stop buying rice, we have nowhere to go with the rice. It won't be a trickle-down effect. It will be like flushing a toilet if the ag industry collapses. Totally 100% dependent upon the Lord Jesus Christ. I surrender it to Him.
So we've got a farmer who literally cannot sell his rice because his biggest customers, Mexico and China, stopped buying. And his solution is prayer? Look, faith is great, but this isn't a divine intervention problem. This is an economic policy problem. When you support politicians who wage trade wars, this is the predictable outcome. China didn't just randomly decide to stop buying American rice. They got hit with tariffs, so they found other suppliers. Brazil, Thailand, Vietnam, they were happy to fill that gap. And here's the kicker. Those relationships don't just snap back. When China signs long-term contracts with other countries, they're not sitting around waiting for America to change its mind. The flushing a toilet analogy is actually perfect, because that's exactly what happened to these trade relationships. Once they're gone, they're gone.
MAGA supporting farmers are whining that the USAID is withholding funds for farmers for conservation programs. The farmers are learning that their conservation payments are frozen because those contracts were funded through the Inflation Reduction Act. You know that thing that they hated that Biden got passed? Oh, but y'all benefited from that, huh?
This right here is the whole game. You spent years calling it the Inflation Reduction Act like it was poison. Fox News told you it was government overreach. You probably shared memes about it being a socialist takeover. But guess what was in that bill? Conservation programs, rural development funds, climate resilience grants for farmers. Money that was literally designed to help you. And now that it's frozen, suddenly you care about government funding? Where was this energy when the bill was being debated? It's like complaining about the fire department being defunded after you voted for the defund the fire department candidate. You can't have it both ways. Either government programs are evil socialist handouts, or they're necessary support for American agriculture. Pick one.
Skyler Holden is a cattle producer in eastern Missouri. You know, the state that voted for Donald Trump over Vice President Kamala Harris. He shared his story, his whining, crying story on TikTok.
I need your help to save my farm and many other farms. I wanted to give you guys an update on what we figured out with our contract through NRCS. So to give you some backstory, if you haven't watched the previous video, please go out, watch that previous video I've got on there. We are possibly going to lose our farm if NRCS doesn't hold up their contract with us on the EQIP program. So the reason that they're not able to hold up the contract is our EQIP program, which is cost sharing on fences, waters, a well, and some seedings, was funded by the Inflation Reduction Act. Because of the executive orders, there's a pause or a freeze on the funding through the Inflation Reduction Act, and they're not able to pay out on the stuff that we completed or anything going forward. But the issue I have is I've already done a bunch of the work, already paid for the material, already paid for the labor, so I'm out all that cost, and I use my farm operating expenses in order to do those projects, because per contract, I knew that I was going to get cost sharing refunds on the stuff once completed, but now that it's completed, they're saying that they're unable to provide the funds because of the freeze on the Inflation Reduction Act funds. So I reached out to a couple different senators and Congress people. So I reached out to Ann Wagner's office. I have not heard back from them. I reached out to Josh Hawley's office. I have heard back from him, not from him personally, but from his office. And they are looking into it because they said that this should not be happening. The intention was not to take away the funding from the farmers, but doing the Inflation Reduction Act, cutting those costs, then it's also taken away from the programs that those programs helped out. So It's in the works, but what I need from you guys is if you could please share this, tag your representative, tag your senators. I need to get some ground on this because I'm not the only one this is affecting. So there are other farmers in the comments saying that they're in the same boat that I'm in because they signed these contracts, and the contracts, even like, so whenever I looked into the contract, I made sure that that funding was set aside. It wasn't funding that, oh, we hope it's there whenever it's done. I made sure that that funding was set aside so that way before I made these business decisions, I knew that funding was there per contract. So they're backing out on the contract because they don't have the funding, they can't release the funds. So please tag the representatives, please tag the senators. I need to get some ground on this. We need to help me and other farmers out. We've got to get this funding paid out.
Okay, I actually feel for this guy. He did his homework. He checked that funding was allocated. He signed a contract in good faith. That's responsible business planning. But here's the brutal reality. When you vote for people who campaign on cutting government programs, you don't get to act shocked when government programs get cut. And notice how quickly the tune changes? Now he's calling senators, asking for government intervention. The same government he probably wanted to get off farmers' backs. This is what happens when political rhetoric meets economic reality. Campaign promises about draining the swamp sound great until you realize you need that swamp to pay your bills. For anyone watching, this is why you research the actual policies, not just the slogans. Cut government spending always sounds good until it's spending that helps you.
Bitch, you think you're paying an increased premium on eggs right now? Whoo! I hope you're keyed in to what's going on in the agriculture industry. Some 25 to 75% of the workforce is missing already because they're not just taking the bad ones. So what happens to the fruits and vegetables when the workers aren't there to pick them? Don't worry, I'm not gonna make you wait for the answer. I'm gonna go ahead and give it to you. The food rots on the ground. Farmers lose money, maybe even their farms, if you understand how the American farming system is subsidized by the government. And we, the consumer, we pay increased premiums for what's left in the stores.
So you wanted mass deportations and now your crops are rotting because nobody's there to pick them? Shocking. This is basic supply and demand. When you remove 25 to 75% of your agricultural workforce, what exactly did you think would happen? That American citizens were going to suddenly start lining up for $12 an hour farm work in 90-degree heat? Here's the economic reality. American agriculture has depended on immigrant labor for decades. Not because farmers are evil, but because it's backbreaking work that Americans generally won't do at those wages. And raising wages sounds great in theory, but when labor costs double, guess who pays? You. At the grocery store. That $3 apple becomes a $6 apple real quick. This isn't about being pro or anti-immigration. This is about understanding that your food system has dependencies. When you break those dependencies without a replacement plan, you get exactly what we're seeing. Crops rotting and food prices skyrocketing. Ideology doesn't harvest tomatoes. People do.
Oh, but wait, there's more. Because now we're going to pay increased premiums on the cost of imports? Man, it's a great day to live in America. It's the nicest third world country I've ever been to.
Hey, soybean, wheat, and sorghum farmers, do you like eating your product? I sure hope so, because remember when y'all were so happy that we were going to be America first and America only, and therefore we weren't going to be feeding all those people around the world because we were going to prioritize ourselves first? How do you feel now that so many American farmers are at risk for losing their farms because the U.S. government is no longer buying commodities from them in order to supply those food programs? And many of you didn't even know that the food grown right on your farm in the middle of nowhere was getting eaten by people in Africa and Asia because you sell to large grain elevators and commodity buyers. Not only did those programs make sure that fewer people in the world from not enough food, but they also stabilized prices by buying up surplus crops and created consistent demand that wasn't subject to the whims of global trade. See, when you produce too much of a crop or demand falls internationally or domestically for that crop, it's great to have an agency that comes in and buys up everything that you don't want to help people not starve, and in turn, you're not going to starve.
Now, this is the part most people don't understand. Those international food programs weren't just charity. They were economic stabilizers for American farmers. When you produce too much corn or wheat, having government programs that buy up surplus keeps prices from completely collapsing. It's like having a safety net under your market. But America First ideology saw international aid as waste. Why are we feeding people in Africa when Americans are struggling? Well, here's why. Because those same programs kept American farmers afloat during bad years. They provided consistent demand when private markets fluctuated. Remove those programs, and suddenly farmers are completely at the mercy of market volatility. No buffer, no safety net, just pure capitalism, which, surprise, isn't always pretty. It's the same logic as burning down bridges because you don't want to pay for maintenance. Sure, you save money today until you need to cross the river.
The insane thing is that people who voted for Trump, farmers want bailouts, socialist bailouts. MAGAs feel very free to call ICE on South Koreans trying to build a Hyundai plant. People that they call ICE on won't pick fruit anymore, so the fruit fields are going to waste. Construction companies that voted for Trump, the owners voted for Trump, they don't have workers now. And they're surprised. And not only surprised, they want sympathy. And they want your rage bait views so they can monetize off of it. This is dystopia.
The hypocrisy is breathtaking. These are the same people who screamed about student loan forgiveness being unfair government handouts. But when their industry needs help, different story. College kids asking for loan relief after predatory lending practices? Pay your debts. Farmers needing bailouts after voting for policies that destroyed their markets. Save American agriculture. And let's be clear, at least students tried to better themselves through education. These farmers literally voted for the person who promised to do exactly what he's doing. But here's what really gets me. They want sympathy, and they want to monetize their pain through social media, making TikToks about losing the farm while asking for donations. At some point, you have to ask, are you learning from this experience, or are you just looking for someone else to blame?
And not to mention the alligator Alcatrazes and the detention centers and the horribleness, concentration camps.
In an authoritarian regime, a dictator or ruling elite will almost always turn on their own supporters when their power is at risk, even slightly. It's not if, it's when. So let's talk about how and why it happens. Number 1, loyalty is conditional, not reciprocal. In an authoritarian regime, loyalty only flows one way, upward. The second a supporter becomes inconvenient, disobedient, or too visible, they're expendable. You don't get rewarded for loyalty. You get punished for visibility. If you gain influence, charisma, or a following, you're now a threat, even if you're loyal. Number 2, purges are built into the system. Authoritarian regimes rely on cycles of purges to maintain control. These purges serve to eliminate potential rivals, install fear in the ranks, and distract the public with internal enemies. Number 3, paranoia becomes policy. The longer an authoritarian stays in power, the more paranoid they become. Loyalists aren't immune. In fact, they're often the first to go because they know too much. Or they were too close to power for too long. If you're too close to the throne, you're too close to blame. Number 4, crisis equals cannibalism. In times of political crisis, economic collapse, protest, international pressure, authoritarians devour their own. They blame officials for failures. They stage public firings or show trials. They sacrifice loyalists to satisfy public outrage. It creates the illusion of accountability without giving up control. Number 5 is when supporters mistake proximity for power. This one's big because in authoritarian systems, access to the leader is not the same as power. The moment a supporter believes they've earned influence or autonomy, they get crushed. Why? Because authoritarianism is not about collaboration. It's about control.
This breakdown of authoritarian loyalty is spot on, but here's the part that hits hardest for these farmers. They thought they were part of the inner circle. They went to rallies. They put up yard signs. They shared the memes. They felt like they were part of something bigger. But political movements aren't friendships. When you're no longer useful, you get discarded. And right now, struggling farmers asking for government help aren't useful to a movement built on cutting government. The tragic part is how predictable this was. Every authoritarian movement in history follows this pattern. First, they eliminate the obvious enemies. Then they turn on allies who become inconvenient. These farmers are learning what every political scientist knows. Proximity to power isn't the same as having power. Being a supporter isn't the same as being protected. And the saddest part, some of them will keep supporting the system even as it destroys them, because admitting they were wrong feels worse than losing everything.
Number 6 is that internal dissent is treated worse than external threats. Authoritarians fear internal betrayal way more than they fear foreign enemies. A supporter who questions decisions or tries to moderate policy, they're going to be treated as more dangerous than the opposition because they actually have credibility. Moderates, reformists, and good soldiers are usually the first to fall. The final point is that authoritarianism will eat itself. It starts by silencing the opposition, then the critics, then journalists, then protesters, then activists, then the loyal lieutenants, then the inner circle. And that's the pattern. You're never going to be safe in a system built on fear. So in an authoritarian regime, the dictator will turn on their supporters to maintain fear, to eliminate rivals, to shift blame, and to prove that no one is untouchable. Because the system only survives if everyone is afraid, including the loyal ones.
I think the tariffs are the ice cream on the cake of a perfect storm. When you try to sell a product, okay, U.S. soybeans leaving New Orleans without the tariff to China are cheaper than Brazilian soybeans at the current market. But when you put the tariff on top of them, Brazilian beans are cheaper.
I just would like to see somebody help us get our markets back. We need our exports, and we just need to be paid for what we do. And that's not happening. And we're in real trouble.
Brother, you were being paid through trade relationships that took decades to build, through international programs that stabilized your markets, through conservation programs that shared your costs. But you voted for people who promised to tear all of that down. And they did exactly what they said they would do. This isn't a mystery. This isn't bad luck. This is cause and effect. The brutal truth? You can't get those markets back by asking nicely. China has moved on. They've got reliable suppliers now who don't change trade policies every 4 years. And here's the business lesson everyone should learn. Customers don't owe you loyalty, especially when you keep changing the terms of the deal. These farmers are learning what every entrepreneur knows. You can't burn bridges and expect to walk back across them later.
Look, on the one hand, it sucks to see farmers struggling in the way that they are and doing the overall rounds of business and the rising costs. But at the same time, we have to be brutally honest here and say, you voted for this. This is exactly what Trump wanted to do, and he laid this out to you completely 100% in advance before you went to the polls. Now, they didn't reveal who they voted for, nor was it asked, but I am willing to bet that a town hall filled with Arkansas farmers is probably not a town hall filled with Kamala Harris voters. This is the result of Trump's unilateral tariffs and his isolationist philosophy when it comes to economics. It straight up doesn't work, and it doesn't bring jobs back. There is no reason we should be retaliating against our own allies instead of strengthening the relationship we have with them if we want to combat our adversaries like China. I also kind of think it's rich to see these type of people, these Trump voters, asking for government handouts because of the rising costs to do business in farming. Well, they are the same people who are saying that these college kids who are asking for student loan forgiveness are asking for government handouts. You're doing the same thing because of rising costs, and it's a burden. All of a sudden, this energy of no government handouts is completely faded away when you are affected. And remember, this was laid out to you 100% in advance before Trump got elected. He told you he was going to do this, and you still voted for it.
And there it is. The bottom line that nobody wants to hear. You still voted for it. All the information was available. The economic analysis, the trade war history, the predictions about what would happen to agriculture. But feelings beat facts. Identity beat economics. And now reality is collecting its bill. The frustrating part isn't that they're struggling, it's that they're acting surprised. Like this came out of nowhere, and the selective outrage about government handouts? Chef's kiss. Perfect example of how principles disappear the second they become inconvenient. Look, farming is hard, always has been. But when you consistently vote against your own economic interests because of cultural grievances, this is what happens. The market doesn't care about your politics. Supply chains don't care about your feelings, and trade partners definitely don't care about your regrets. Economics is math, not emotion, and the math was always going to work out this way.
I'm Ed, or Brusque Poet, with the Un-F America Tour, and we're about to start our tour this September 18th at the Colorado State University, Fort Collins, to confront Charlie Kirk. And if you want to learn more about it, click the link in my bio to go to our website. And also, if you can, make sure you donate, because it's going to help us a lot with travel. It's going to help me a lot with travel expenses. And it's also going to help us a lot with our voter registration efforts. So if you can, chip in anything, because it really does help us. If you want to see more videos from me, make sure to hit that follow button on whatever platform you're watching. Give this video a like, and I'll see you guys very soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being so dumb.
What? We tried to warn. Never mind.